Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing, the podcast for manufacturing leaders and professionals.
Designed for high impact on your way to work or unwind on your way home to gain clarity for tomorrow.
Step out of your comfort zone and discover new perspectives to add value, get results, and make a difference.
Yes, let's jump in.
Good day, and welcome to another episode of Mindfulness Manufacturing.
Yeah, Trevor, that good day. I love that. That Canadian coming out in you is just, it's unreal. Welcome, everybody.
Yeah, so we've got someone else from South Carolina on the podcast, great guest today. And so many times that we end up going back to why mindfulness in manufacturing. And here Dave was having dinner with one of his colleagues, and that topic came up at their dinner. And before Dave had the chance to explain it, our guest Greg Morgan had an opportunity to explain to Dave why it does connect. And welcome, Greg. And how about you explain that to our listeners?
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. My name's Greg Morgan. I was with a Fortune 500 company for 42 years. In my retirement, before my retirement, I was operations global manufacturing vice president. We had 38 plants, 22 countries. So I spent a lot of times around. And when Dave said mindful manufacturing, I said right away, I agree 100%. There's all kinds of things mindful about manufacturing because the people that we interact with every day, how do we interact with those? How do we make those things happen? That's a key to manufacturing. It's not the machines. It's not the people that make the difference. And that's what we want to talk about.
Yeah. And what's so cool about that? I mean, welcome to the show, Greg. And what's so cool about that is just for someone at the senior level in an organization that is mindful of the importance of people and the impact of people. You know, I have to, Greg, I'll put you on the spot, but I mean, just a couple of days ago on LinkedIn, out of nowhere, right? I mean, Greg gets an Inspirational Leader award on LinkedIn, and quote unquote, Greg, thank you for always bringing your best self to work. Now, Greg, I mean, how long has it been since you've been retired?
I've been retired for almost 6 years.
Almost 6 years. And like a couple of days ago on LinkedIn, former colleagues and business, your network is still connecting and reaching out and thinking about the difference you've made. So look, not putting you on a pedestal, not trying to put wings on you or anything like that, but that is amazing. And one of the reasons, again, for the beauty of, we got a VP of operations with global experience, and we've got folks just coming out of the blue, recognizing that we want to know, our listeners want to know where this comes from. So unpack that. What's mindfulness have to do, and where you get these kind of results?
Well, I still get a lot of feedback. It just so happened I started a plant in India 22 years ago, and I still consider those guys. They were all very young at the time. These guys were my family, and again in India, a lean organization where the leader is interacting every day, hands-on teaching. That's not necessarily the norm. So those guys, they were kind of my kids, and we had a very, very difficult startup, but at the same time, I still interact with those guys all the time. And it is really interesting to see the success they've had, the learnings they've had for our interactions, for our ability to develop their talents with people and leading people. And it's paid off with all of them very, very well.
So, Greg, what would be the Trevor? I don't mean to interrupt you or cut you out, but I'm sitting on the edge of my seat here. Greg, what would be like maybe the top three things that you thought or believe was the contribute to your success on that, or that team's success in that startup?
Well, when we started up the plant, we hired the first, I think, 3 or 4 engineers. We then taught them about what we were trying to do with getting them to participate in the leadership of the plant, participate on how we did things in the plant, and to the point where they actually interviewed and helped hire all the associates. We only had 3 levels of management in the plant. Myself as the plant manager, we had one set of leaders, and then everybody else reported to that group. So each one of these people really had a lot of ownership into who they hired and how they wanted, what kind of openness they had to lead in a little bit different way than maybe the norm had been. So I think that was a big piece. They owned it from the very beginning, and they had never in our industry. None of these guys had ever been there in that kind of industry before. And again, I think that we also had a chance, as I said, we had a tough startup, so we had a chance to work side by side, shoulder to shoulder, with a lot of hands-on type of things. So I think the second thing is, that they got to see me demonstrate that I wanted to help teach them. I wanted them to be involved in that kind of hands-on, not only with the machine itself, but with how we led people. So I think, the top 2, at least, those are the ones that really, that I would say that had the impact.
Cool.
So in a different country, different culture, Greg, how did you make that connection? Was there barriers with language or just communication? And how did you have success with that?
It's interesting. Most business is done in English in India. So as far as language, it was not a big deal, but culturally very different on how you interact with leadership. And I guess I believe, as I've traveled around the world and working in manufacturing operations, that we all have, at the fundamental level, we all have basically the same kind of need. We want to be listened to. We want to be appreciated for what we have to offer, and we like to have a say. As human beings, we like to have a say in how things are done. And if you give people that opportunity, it's amazing how those barriers come down.
Wow!
And we were fortunate. We selected people that were open to that kind of leadership, and it pays off for us.
Yeah. So the opportunity to do a startup is one thing, but what about the times in which you've gone into an existing location or operation and you found things not quite so popular, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is nice to start with a clean sheet of paper. Like I say, you can talk about cultural differences, you can talk about that, but even within existing facilities within North America, you'll have those cultural differences that have been brought forth over the years of that particular plant. So each plant has its personality, each plant has its history, and how it developed its callouses. With the relationship with management of the organization. So you had to really come into each organization and understand where they're coming from. And sometimes you had to take baby steps because, first of all, you have to build the trust. You had to show the change was sincere and real. And when things got tough, you had to demonstrate that you weren't going to fall back to old ways. So and depending on the age of the plant and or the organization and the time that they developed their callouses in different ways, it took a while in many cases to change that.
So you
But
talk
it's possible.
You talk about old ways, Greg. So what were some of your old ways? And you sound like you got some techniques on how you change some of those. And how does one, if you're aware of it, how do you change it? Because you sound like you were aware, and it sounds like you had a lot of growth yourself.
Well, I had the opportunity to come into these plants. When I started out, I actually started in the technical organization. I started in research and development. So my opportunity to go into plants personally was more from an engineer in implementing new equipment and putting it in place. So I got a chance to kind of develop my skills as far as doing that with people that I had no authority over, so I had to learn how to again, get them to trust me, get them to believe that I wanted their input, because, I'm just some dummy that doesn't know how this plant runs. Please help me. And I'll show you what I think will work from a technical standpoint. So and again, I've always been lucky to be open to watching how other people interact, and we've all been led by people that we like to see and enjoy being led. And we've had some people that say, boy, I get my chance. That's not the way I want to do it. So I guess it's you learn on the fly. You learn from being in a different type of organization, and then coming into a leadership role, and you use all those skills, and take pieces of them and develop your leadership style from that.
Yeah. Man, that's strong. I love the calluses reference. Man, that's an awesome metaphor there. But Greg, going into these different locations, along the same line, I'm going to ask you to be vulnerable here for us all.
Okay.
But also just get the pat on the back for yourself. There's, having been retired now 6 years, 42 years, right, in manufacturing. When you think back on the days of your manufacturing, what was the time that you wish you could just do over? The experience, the conversation, the circumstance. What is that do-over moment for you? And then flip it over and say, man, if I could do it all over again, I would do this 10 times over. What would share with us the contrast of those two moments? And
yeah, that's a real good question, Dave. The do-over, I think that we were retrofitting a plant in Russia. And again, I thought that basically I had done several startups at that point, and I thought that, again, as I said, if you just come in and treat people the way you want to be treated and all this, that's going to work. And I underestimated the cultural difference in this particular area of the world, and it was difficult to really get people, because you had language barriers, you had cultural barriers, you had history of mistrust between the U.S. and Russia. And I would have done things differently in the fact that I would have slowed way down and not just maybe become arrogant. I don't know if you think it works everywhere, it's going to work here too. So that was the one that really I struggled with, and we had to kind of slow down to speed up. If you catch my drift there, yeah. Because it had to invest a lot of time in building that fundamental trust and belief that an American company can come in and do business here and be able to make changes in the way things have been. From the other side, again, I often recognize the effort that we did in the India plant, because those guys have been so successful in taking what they learned. We actually took the structure of the plant, and within 3 years, the Indian government was coming in and having the military come in and try to understand the way the organization was. They were trying to learn on how to develop leaders in various parts of our joint venture partner. There had a joint venture with Ford Motor Company and some other companies, and they really wanted to learn. So it was so rewarding to be able to see that you were making a difference, not only in the plant that you were starting, but kind of in throughout the country with how things are done.
Yeah. Wow. Very cool.
In the last Gallup poll, they talked about manufacturing still being below the average of industry engagement here in North America, being closer to 25%. What you're talking about, like, it makes sense. And obviously it's in the space that Dave and I live. And then sometimes we feel very out of place because what you're saying isn't always common. And
Right.
Why is that? I mean, this isn't new. This isn't a new leadership principle. You're talking about servant leadership. You're talking about the power
Right.
through the people and that type of mindfulness. And I still get fascinated by companies that do really well and don't really see their people the way that you've described, Greg. And why do you think that still is still such a struggle today?
Well, I think getting buy-in at the highest levels. I mean, I won't say that we didn't have our own struggles within the company that I worked for. A lot of principles still being taught, and we spend a lot of time teaching our human resources organization about the type of people that we wanted from an engineering standpoint, from a first line leadership standpoint, from an HR standpoint, people selection. Everything has to change, and companies have a lot of momentum, and that's not easy to do. And as I said earlier, if you stub your toe a little bit, it's kind of easy to you go back to your fallback position. So it takes people at pretty high levels of the organization. And I was fortunate when I was coming up to have people at the vice president level at that time that says, this is the way we want to do business, and this is going to make that difference. If you can get that commitment and get that momentum, then you can make that change. But sometimes that's hard to get that done at the grassroots level.
That's interesting. You brought up the HR function in that description, because I've always thought that you get what you put into it, right? And when we hire people, the HR function is responsible for the process of employment. And so, question for you: how did you go about getting your HR function on board at different locations and embracing that? Hey, look, this is a front end of the train here. What we put in, I mean, is all we're going to get out at best, right? So, how'd you get the HR function on board in an organization, or those responsible?
Yeah, great question, Dave. And like I say, sometimes I wasn't as successful as I would have liked to have been, but I would say in many cases, the people that you work with, if you show the passion on what you're trying to get to, and you're showing, and I like the way it's described, that servant leadership. A lot of organizations, even within a company, struggle with that. They become kind of guarded about the way they lead and getting and reaching out. So you have to demonstrate. You have to keep reinforcing, but you have to also stand up and say, "Wait a minute, I hear what you're saying. You're not really getting on board. I need your help." So we would march forward and we'd fall back, and so there was times we had to go back and forth on that. Some cases there were people that struggled with that, but we were fortunate that we had, again, before I got up to the plant leadership role, we had some people that had kind of laid the groundwork. It takes a while, and you have to look throughout the organization, not just in the particular area that you're trying to work on, manufacturing. It has to be the support organizations as well.
If there's a listener driving into work today and they have the ear of the one at the top, which is what you're saying, it needs to come from there. Like, how do you, or maybe even if you were going into a plant with that person driving in today, what's your first steps, Greg? When you walk in that plant, you can tell right away that we're missing out on the people side. They're just not mindful of it. They just don't see it. Where do you start?
A lot of times I'd like to walk through a facility. It just so happened that we purchased another had a couple of major purchases while I was in my role. So I got a chance to go in and assess, if you will, into a different organization. And I like to walk through with the current leadership of that plant. And you can tell about people's eye contact, about their body language when they see the boss coming through, if you will, and have honest conversations about those kind of things, and talk about, why do you think that is? How do you think we change that? So you can pick up quite a bit just in the first hour or a couple hours in the plant, and how interactions go. If people come up to you and shake your hand, and you feel very welcomed, and they are comfortable interacting, you got a great start. If people are kind of standoffish and they want to not notice that you're there, then that's something you got to point out and say, we have some work to do to get where we need to get to.
Yeah. So, and Greg, what don't you tolerate when you go through a plant and you walk and you see and you experience, the vibe of the culture, what is it? What have you seen that you're like, no, stop, hold the phone, drop the mic, this is intolerable? Give us some examples of that you've seen or that you've maybe heard of, but what's that look like?
One of the things to me, David, that, and again, you're catching me here on the spot a little bit, but great question.
Hey, that's what this is. This is real.
I know. Yeah, and you're doing a good job of it. I think one of the things that starts, if you're going to gain trust with people, if you're going to change a culture of a plant, always start with safety. Because it's something, when you talk about safety, no one can say, I'm against that. I want to get people hurt. So what a great place to start that dialogue with the leadership, with the person on the floor. You can tell that by the way the plant is organized, by the way the housekeeping is done, by the way a lot of those kind of things. You can get common ground to start this conversation, and it's something you can point out very easily. Wow. It's something you can start a conversation about that keeps people engaged and enrolled in what you're trying to do, and then you can build from there. But it's one that you can see pretty quickly too. Yeah.
The safety, I mean, that's so cool, because safety does bridge, it transcends opinion, political ideas, it transcends culture. If you care about the welfare, well-being of the other person, what a way that is demonstrated in the safety of an organization, whether it's manufacturing or not. If leadership doesn't care about safety, they probably don't care about the individual. Send me a nasty gram if you will, but safety is a reflection of what we think of our people. Agreed?
I agree. Absolutely. I mean, if you look around the world today, it seems as if culturally we're more into talking about the differences we have, and safety is a perfect thing that we all have in common. And finding that common ground that we can have a conversation in a non-threatening way, and we can have that because no one wants to see anybody get hurt in a manufacturing operation.
Right.
It still seems like the Bob Chapman story with Oklahoma Steel is like a new story still, how we just turned it around just on those principles you're talking about, Greg. And I never really looked at it that way, but when I think about Bob's story and the foundation of safety in a global organization, yeah, it does unite us. What a great insight.
Yeah.
I had a discussion this morning with a founder working with his CEO on a very fast growing company. And that was one thing that I see the CEO and the founder so tightly on: the care of their customers, their people, the safety. And one other thing that really stood out for me in my conversation was we talked a little bit about ego. And he talked very openly about, I do have ego issues and I'm aware of it. And he talked about just his strategies around it. And I'm like, man, sounds like the CEO, these two guys are going to be successful. I said, you already separate yourself from you put yourself in the top 5-10% because you're talking about that you got it. And most people struggle to even say, what do I have to work on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially on a plant startup. We would often start out the organizational structure discussion with an inverted pyramid, with basically the top person at the plant, or the plant manager, as being at the bottom of the pyramid. Historically, we've trained ourselves to think this person's at the top. Well, that automatically gets you the conversation that people work for you. And you really need to change the thought process. Is the plant manager works for everybody in that plant to help them be successful. If you can get that fundamental conversation started with the people in that plant and the people that you're hiring to support, you can make a big difference. But sometimes that ego gets in the way, because the guy with the title sometimes loves to have that name at the top of the pyramid.
Yeah. Greg, with you coming up through the ranks over the years, you referred to your experience, as a technical person and kind of having to, earn your stripes, as you go. What would be something very specific for a listener that, coming out of this, kind of on the back end of this, man, you're retired, right? You've been out 6 years, but your knowledge, your experience, man, it's ageless, right? So somebody new coming into an organization, what would it be? What would you just implore them to, focus on or be conscious of? What's that one thing that you just think could propel them in their career if they could just stay focused on this one thing?
Another good one, Dave. One of the things that we used to always talk about, and again, whether I was coming into a plant as a technical expert, as a person that was bringing in a new process, a new piece of equipment or whatever, or as a leadership person, especially into an established plant, that you need to remember that the people you're working with, they do this every single day. And again, don't let your ego get ahead of you. I may be the smartest guy in the world with regard to the piece of equipment that I, invented or designed or whatever. But there's a guy here that doesn't know anything about it, doesn't know you, and you need to encourage. You need to enroll him. We always say engage and enroll is the way you need to engage him in what you're trying to do. Clear communication, what it is, and enroll him into helping that be successful, because he has the power of knowing that organization, being part of it, and being able to make you successful. It may be the greatest thing ever, but it can be unsuccessful if you don't be humble, come in and engage and enroll that person into what you're trying to do. And then you can really move it where you want to go.
Wow.
That's awesome. That subject matter expert who's standing right there that knows every sound and pulse and every little nuance. It's all right there.
That's right.
I got to throw my 2 cents in there. I had a conversation recently, and it's an ever increasing conversation of people new in their career coming out. They've got a degree, whatever, and they come into an organization and they talk about, well, the book says this, where I came from says, this is how we did it where we came from. And I hear the recipients of that just revolt. They puke. They reject, absolutely reject that coming from somebody coming in the door, whether new or not. Nobody wants to hear about how you did it where you came from. It's about where we are here and now. How can you help me and we all be successful together? It amazes me how frequently that topic comes up, to where people are not conscious that nobody cares how you did it in Las Vegas or Toledo, or, they care about where we are right now. And that's huge.
Yeah, and you have to be sensitive to that fact, because once again, the people you're talking to, they feel like they have been successful in the way they have done it. So introducing an idea, and if you start beating them over the head with, this is the way the corporate wants it done, this is the way that the most successful plant wants it done, or whatever, or this is the way we've always done it, all those kind of things get people to turn their ears off, right? I mean, so you've got to be ahead of that. You have to talk them in, again, engage them in what you're trying to say. Let them talk and try to incorporate some of what they're bringing to you and turn it back in, and then you can come up with the best idea. And I think that's how you make it work.
Engage and enroll. Engage and enroll. I love that. That is cool. So, Greg, kind of wrapping it up here. Tell us about what you do in your spare time. All of your career, but you're able to spend a little more time in it right now. What's something unique that you've got in your garage?
Yeah, Dave likes to come through. I'm a car guy, so I have too many cars. I have them stacked on top of each other. There's so many, but now that I've retired, I go out and bang my fingers and turn wrenches, and I'm actually doing some reupholstering on one car right now, but I have several old cars that I like to go back and go out and see if I can't make them new again. If you go back and look at my Myers-Briggs, restorative was always one of my so it still comes through in my elderly years as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, there's if I'm not mistaken, one of my favorites is a 48 Buick.
Yeah, 48 Buick convertible.
Crazy.
Yeah. Crazy. Got 41,000 miles on it originally. It's a beautiful mid-sized car for its era.
Yeah, right. Good stuff.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Greg. So much to unpack in that career, and fascinating. You're retired for a while. We're trying to break through with this whole concept of mindfulness manufacturing. And here you are. It's like, hey, boys, this is what we were doing 30 years ago, and we just need people to put it together. So thank you for coming and supporting our community and growing, our industry into a better place to work, and we can really tap into our people, like you say. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for inviting me, and trust me, I've said this a million times. There's no other way to do it, guys. You're right on the right track.
Good deal. Thank you. Thanks, Greg.
All right.
Great day. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. How you show up matters.
We'd love for you to subscribe, share with a colleague, and tell us what you think.
Your feedback's important to provide this high-quality, powerful program that makes a difference in your life and others. Take care.
See you next time.